Afternoon, everyone. My name is Brian Schreiner, Dean of the FIU College of Communication, Architecture, and the Arts here in Miami, Florida. And I want to thank you for joining the Lillian Lodge Copenhagen Center for the Advancement of Women in Communication, virtual national conversation, inspiring change, making a difference, finding your voice. When I was asked to share a few words to kick off the event, I thought immediately of Indra Nooyi. You know her as one of the top CEOs and business leaders in the world today and the former chairperson and CEO of PepsiCo. And she said, whatever, quote, whatever anyone says or does, assume a positive intent. You will be amazed at how your whole approach to a person or problem becomes very different. In my own experience, and thinking about how I interact with others every day, and again, attempting to find my own voice, I was taught something that I want to share with you today, and that was, I think, I feel, I act. And I know I can't hear you, but perhaps in your own mind or out loud, wherever you're at, repeat after me. I think, I feel, I act. Meaning our thoughts influence our emotions, and then our emotions impact our actions. But in finding your voice, there's an extra step in that. And I was taught to think again. So I think, I feel, I think again, I think again, I think again. And that's when you find your voice, and then you act. Reflecting on Indra Nooyi's advice is to assume a positive intent. It impacts the way you interact with individuals. So when you consider how to find your own voice, I recommend you think of Ms. Nooyi's recommendation to think positively and think about thinking again before you act in any situation. And then your words and actions and behaviors will change. So whether you found your own voice or you're in search of finding that voice through today's conversations, you're going to have the benefit of our very special and talented guests who provide you many takeaways from the conversation today. They're experts in their respective fields, especially our keynote speaker, Amy Driscoll, the opinion editor of the Miami Herald and 2023 Pulitzer Prize winner. So you're going to have some amazing guests to talk to you today about finding their voice and how they will share their own experiences. So often we find our voices being molded by the challenges we face in our life and the interactions and how we respond to those interactions and those challenges. So I don't want to take any more of your time except to thank you again for being here. I want to thank Dr. Copenhagen for her continued partnership as Dean Emeritus of FIU and leading the Copenhagen Center along with her very talented team of colleagues, Dr. Abreu and Ms. Carla Zenson. Since the inception of the Copenhagen Center in 2013, they've been offering workshops, leadership training programs, gender equity research initiatives, and many, many partnerships throughout South Florida, but also all of the satellite Copenhagen centers across the country, which I understand are joining us here this afternoon. So a special welcome to all the Copenhagen Fellows and Copenhagen colleagues across the country. These centers and this work is a testament to Dr. Copenhagen's important work. So without further ado, I want to thank you again, and I want to introduce you to my friend and colleague, Dr. Lillian Lodge Copenhagen.
It would help if I unmuted myself. Thank you, Dean Schreiner, for those wonderful remarks. I am also pleased to welcome you to the 8th National Conference of the Copenhagen Center for the Advancement of Women in Communication here at Florida International University. Inspiring change, making a difference, finding your voice. We have an exciting and enlightening program planned for you this afternoon. I know you are aware that women make up more than half the population of the United States. It is therefore very important that communications in this country represent our population equitably, both in the information that is delivered and in those who deliver that information. We have some awesome speakers with us today who will share their thoughts and advice about the theme of our conference and how you as communicators can be heard and make a difference. The mission of the Copenhagen Center is to empower both women professionals and academics in all of the fields of communication in order to develop visionaries and leaders who can make a difference in their communities and in their professions. Our conference today will help us explore opportunities for women to find their voice and become those visionaries and leaders of tomorrow. We will begin with our keynote speaker in the first hour, and that will be followed by our Thought Leaders Forum in the second hour. All our speakers will take questions, and we ask you to put your questions in the chat. I want to give a warm welcome to everyone who has joined us from our satellite centers for the advancement of women in communication at Rowan University and Stevens College. Serving as our keynoter today is Stephanie Bertini, an award-winning television journalist with nearly 2 decades of experience between the United States and Canada. She currently reports for Fox 5 TV in New York and is based in Manhattan. Bertini's experience ranges from investigative reporting to anchoring and hosting traffic, entertainment, and weather segments. She worked as a Miami-based correspondent for the Black News Channel and spent 6 years on air at NBC6 in South Florida. Prior to that, she worked for ABC affiliate WFTV in Central Florida, for KRGV TV in South Texas, and for Canadian television in Northern Ontario, where she began her career as a lifestyle reporter. Deeply committed to journalism, Bertini sits on the Copenhagen Center Leadership Council and serves on the RTDNA Board of Directors. She has received industry recognition for her work, including the prestigious National Edward R. Murrow Award, and recently received an Emmy nomination for her current project, a series of stories detailing the migrant crisis in New York City. It is now my pleasure to introduce our keynote speaker. Amy Driscoll is the award-winning opinion editor for the Miami Herald. In 2023, she received journalism's highest award, the Pulitzer Prize, for editorial writing for her series, Broken Promises. The 5-part series focused on the failure, of politicians and developers to follow through on vows to build parks, revive historic South Florida neighborhoods, and boost transportation. Our keynote at Harvard University in 2003, she co-produced the award-winning Miami Herald podcast, Smoked, was Editor of the Year in 2021 from the Society of Professional Journalists, Florida chapter, and won the Darrell Sifford Memorial Prize in 2007. She has written articles for Neiman Reports on the presidential election and Narrative Neiman Digest on immigration, and was a Pulitzer Prize judge this year. She joined the Herald's opinion team in 2021 after 28 years as a news reporter covering beats ranging from courts to politics, and as an editor overseeing health, politics, and international coverage, including the paper's coverage of the COVID-19 pandemic. Prior to the Herald, Driscoll worked at the Palm Beach Post, covering local government, courts, and politics, and served as correspondent in Tallahassee. A self-styled storyteller at heart, she believes that in the world today, journalism, and especially opinion journalism, can help by elevating voices that might not otherwise be heard, and by creating a conversation instead of a shouting match. Amy?
Thank you so much, Lillian. I hope you all can hear me. I am delighted and honored to be here to talk to all of you about some things that are near and dear to my heart. When the invitation came for me to deliver this speech, I accepted immediately because I believe so strongly in these kinds of conversations where women can help women, where we discuss our paths forward, we can learn from each other. I try to do as much mentoring in my career as I can. And I see this as an opportunity to talk to all of you about what I learned and a bit about my journey. I hope that you will be thinking of questions along the way, because we have time for questions, and I'd be more than happy to talk with you about anything that you're interested in. So you are catching me. I was telling this to Lillian right before this began, that you're catching me right in the middle of the endorsement process. As opinion editor at the Miami Herald, one of our main jobs and on the editorial board is to write endorsements of political candidates or on issues that are facing the voters. And we are deeply immersed in that right now. It's very important work. We find it is the most engaged that our audience becomes on these points, because they appreciate our guidance on how to vote, what we know about candidates, what we know about issues. And it is one of the most important things that we do in any year, let alone in a presidential year. So I made time in my schedule for this because I believe this is very important that we have these kinds of conversations as well ourselves. So thank you again for having me. I really appreciate it. I thought what I would do is talk a little bit about my journey, how I got where I am, and how I found my voice along the way. I think it's a process. It's not a concluded thing that ever happens, but it's a process. And I would talk specifically a bit about the Pulitzer Prize series that I wrote and how that happened for me. And then after that, I thought we could talk a little bit more about what some takeaways that you might have from this conversation. I always find that when I go to one of these events, I really appreciate it when somebody breaks it down and gives you things that are actionable for you. My thoughts will not be just confined to journalism careers. I think a lot of what I can talk about is how to manage your path going forward in any career path. But some things that I've learned along the way, and many of them I learned the hard way. So maybe we can shortcut that a little bit, and you don't have to learn the hard way. So I am the opinion editor at the Miami Herald. That means I'm in charge of the opinion section for the newspaper, which is almost all online now. We do still have a print version, but most of our work is done online. We have an editorial board that is comprised of experienced journalists, including me, and we sit down and discuss issues of the day, things that are facing our community. We try to lead a discussion, hopefully a positive discussion, to change things. So finding your voice and changing and inspiring change is what I do every day. In addition to the editorial board of people, I also edit our opinion columnists, including we have Andres Oppenheimer, who covers Latin America. He's internationally known and has a CNN and Espanol show. You may have heard of him. Whenever I go out to lunch with him, people come up to him, and he's definitely a celebrity. And then I also am in charge of letters to the editor, which is something that our newspaper believes in deeply, because we feel that's a voice we can provide to others in the community if they want to talk about what we've written or issues in the community or anything else. And then beyond that, we also offer a platform for members of the community to write what we call op-eds, which are opinion pieces written by the community about issues that they care about. That is a place where I find we can elevate voices, as Lillian mentioned, that aren't always heard. And that is a really important part of my work, something that I really take pride in. It's very easy for politicians and movers and shakers, and people who already have access to the reins of power, to dominate. And we try to make sure that we offer that opportunity just as much to other people in the community. And in fact, I will offer that to all of you. If you have a local issue you'd like to talk about, you're welcome to submit an op-ed. They are about 650 words. So if you'd like to do that, I'm easily findable on the internet. So that's what I do every day. It's an honor and it's a privilege. And we are also the institutional voice for the newspaper. So part of my job in opinion is to act responsibly, to think for the community, to offer solutions, not just to investigate. We are reporters at heart still. And so we talk to the leaders in our community. We talk to the developers involved in the latest issue. We talk to the neighborhood association or the state attorney or anyone else who has an issue that is in front of the public right now that we think we should know more about. And we use all of that information to form our opinions. There's a lot of opinion journalism out there these days, and a fair amount of it is people just sitting in their living rooms typing away about what they think about the world. That's not what we do. What we do is we investigate, we report, we discuss, we consider, we think what's best for the community. We're not trying to do what's best for us. We're not trying to tell people how to think. We're trying to lay out our reasoning for why we think something is right or wrong and what needs to be done. For instance, there was a recent moment about 2 weeks ago where the Miami City Commission voted to give all the members their own pension for life. We don't like that idea. We think that should go to the taxpayers to decide, since the taxpayers are the ones who are going to pay for it. And we wrote about that pretty extensively, and now they are reconsidering. We hope they will reconsider and reverse that vote because it is unfair to the taxpayers. That's the kind of work that we do. It's not, we try not to be inflammatory. We try to be considered. We try to think things through. When we interview candidates, which is, an enormous part of our work this time of year, we try to interview every candidate in every local race if possible. They won't all meet with us, but most of them do. We have them submit a questionnaire where we ask them a lot of questions. We ask questions of them during our meeting, which mostly is Zoom now, though sometimes it's in person. We ask them follow-up questions. We do background checks. We discuss what we think, and then one of us will write the opinion for the board. And that is what one endorsement consists of. And we are doing, I think we're doing 41 races and ballot issues this general election, and we did a similar amount during the primary. So that's our responsibility. We look at the community and we try to do what we think is best for the community. The way I got to this job, as Lillian mentioned, I was a journalist. I was a reporter for many, many years. I was an editor for many years after that. As a reporter, I did a lot of things. I covered 9/11 in New York. I've been to Haiti a couple of times for the paper. I have covered hurricanes where I was the only one driving in direction toward the storm while all the traffic was streaming in the other direction. It's not a fun feeling, but that's the work. It's exciting, it's interesting, and I have loved every minute of it, or almost every minute of it. And then as an editor, I was editor for a variety of topics: healthcare, politics, foreign coverage. I had a reporter in Venezuela who was picked up by the police. He had just gotten there from Colombia and picked up by the police. And if you know anything about Venezuela, you know that that's a very bad thing. And he disappeared from I could not reach him for many hours. I stayed until very late that night, calling everybody I could come up with to try to put pressure on Venezuela. And they did finally release him and put him on a plane, the next plane that was going anywhere. That was one of the tougher moments of my career as an editor, followed only by the time that I had a reporter in the US Capitol during the attack on January 6th. And he was in the he was in the House gallery, and he called me and said, there's some sort of attack going on and they've told us to hide. And he was under furniture. And then after that, I could not talk to him for a while. His phone did not work. It turned out later on he was in the basement of the Capitol and the cell didn't reach, but I didn't know. That was another moment where I was very, very worried. But he came out of it and was there for the certification of the election, and he's fine. So that was a tough moment also. But journalism itself is full of exciting things like that. I don't ever regret any of the things that I've experienced, but sometimes they are a little more dangerous than we like. So I grew up in a family with journalists. My dad was a journalist, and he told me that journalism was a dying business, but he loved it. And clearly you see what I paid attention to, the loved it part, not the dying business part. And it truly is not dying. He was talking about the print version. My aunt was also a journalist. She was the first woman to get into the Boston Celtics locker room. And she endured a lot. Men were not welcoming to women sports writers in those days. They issued robes to the players because of my aunt. And one of the players refused to wear the robe when she came in. She was given a literal broom closet to interview people instead of in the locker room with the men journalists. But she withstood it all with a sense of humor, and I have learned a lot from her. But I was always a shy kid. I was the kid in class. Maybe some of you can identify with this. I was the kid in class who knew the answer and raised my hand, but when the teacher called on me, my face would turn bright red because I was so embarrassed at having the attention on me. I may not seem that way now, but that is how I felt. We moved a lot because my dad was a journalist. We moved around a lot when I was growing up. And I think along the way, I became an adept observer. When you go into a new school as a kid, you got to figure out how things work pretty quick or something bad might happen to you. So you learn how to walk and how to talk and who the popular kids are and all those things. And I think somewhere along the way that observer status has helped me in journalism. It's a natural extension of that for me to be observant all the time and to see how people are behaving and to think things through. So from that, I became I became a journalist in high school. I became a journalist in college. I got my first job, and I've gotten a lot of opportunities along the way. Some of them have been hard won. Some of them have been given to me, and I'm grateful for both. But I thought I would talk to you a little bit now about what the takeaways from some of that might be. I'm my work toward the series that won the Pulitzer Prize began really in the same way that most projects do in journalism, which is we had a very busy year that year. It was an election year. So it was 2 years ago when I was working on the series. And there was no time. And we worked all the way through October, which is where we are right now. And when November came, I looked back at my yearly evaluation that I had started at the beginning of the year as part of our formal process at the paper. And I knew that I had put down that I wanted to write a series of editorials on some topics that I knew about that were bothering me. And I had not gotten to them. I had maybe done, 3 days worth of work on something that was going to take a long time. But I turned to my boss at the time and said, I still really want to do this. So I worked very hard. I worked through much of the vacation time when everybody else was off doing holiday stuff. I worked on weekends, and we published it the last day of the year. And there was one of the upper management editors at the Herald. I was at a holiday get together for NAHJ, which is the National Association of Hispanic Journalists. And she said to me, there's always a question of whether to publish at the end of the year when people aren't paying attention or wait to the beginning. And I said, over my dead body. I have worked so hard to get to this point. They are ready. Those pieces are ready. We're publishing. And we did. And I was glad that we did. It wasn't that I wanted anything out of it particularly. It's just that these were problems that were facing the community for so long. And I did not want to be one more delay on those problems. And they were things like what developers promised to the community when they were allowed to develop big pieces of property along the Miami River. The Miami River is where a lot of indigenous people settled many, many years ago. And there were a lot of remnants of their settlements, but we were allowing these developers to build right on top of that with a promise that they would preserve parts of it. But they were not preserving parts of it in the way they said they were. That was just one of them. There were many others. A train that was supposed to go to the predominantly Black part of town was not built. Several things, and they were problems that have been festering for decades. And I knew about them because I live here and I invest myself in this community. And they bothered me as a member of this community. This was wrong. This should not be continuing to happen. Politicians bank on the idea that you'll forget, that they will allow things to be promised. And then 10 years later, who remembers? But I remember. And I wanted to write about that. And so I did. And so it was a passion project for me, but it was also based on reality. I knew what had been going on. It was information that I had gleaned over years. I understood the problems. I knew who to talk to. I could write those pieces with authority, and that's what I did. So when I think about that, I think about the moment when I made the commitment to myself that I was going to make this happen. It started with my evaluation, my annual evaluation, which is something that if you're not working yet, you'll find out what those are like. Most organizations use them as a way to keep track of progress with their employees, and that's a good idea. Everyone hates them. I hate them, but they are actually quite useful if you look at them in the right light. And that's what I learned from that moment, was that I had written that down at the beginning of the year, and by the end of the year, I still really wanted to do it. And so I made it happen. I knew I had the platform. I knew I had the experience. I knew I had the information more or less that I could get it done. So it wasn't based on, I just have a passion for this. It was based on a real foundation that I can accomplish this. So I think that's an important thing when you're thinking about what you want to do. Having a passion, following your passion, that's wonderful, but it also should be something that you're good at. So be aware of that. Be thinking about what you actually like to do, but also what you're good at. Oftentimes what you're good at, you can find your passion in once you start to work in that area. So I'm not a huge advocate for just following your passion. I'm more of an advocate of being a little realistic about it. And if you're not sure, try it for a while, but be aware of the signs of whether or not you're succeeding at that. So for me, the moment that series became real was when I committed to it. I said, yes, me, yes, those problems, yes, I wrote it down, yes, I mean it. And I find in life and in careers that there are a lot of people who will, after you succeed at something, come up to you and say, you know, I always meant to do X or Y, or I always thought I would, blah, 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 but they didn't. And that is kind of the defining line is, do you really want to do it? And if you do it to the full extent that you're able. Do not give yourself the excuse of doing it most of the way. And that way, if you fail, you have an excuse as to why you failed in your head, not in your heart. You're not telling this to other people, but you know if you've done it as well as you can do it. And that's what I mean, and that is something that I learned by failing at things. There are things that I applied for that I did not get. There was a fellowship I applied for that was, I just wrote something and said, well, maybe they'll say yes. And they did not, rightfully so. Another opportunity that I had, that I went and I had to do an interview with a horseshoe of people. I walked in the door and there was a horseshoe of people sitting there, which is a very intimidating setting. And I had just did not have any idea what they were asking me. And I did not prepare well for it. And afterwards, they did not give it to me. And I thought, yes, they should not have given it to me. I did not earn that. But I have earned other things, and I have learned from that. I did apply for a Nieman Fellowship, which is the most prestigious fellowship that journalists can get at Harvard. And I got that one. But I got that one based on the failures of the ones that came before. I applied for it. That actually happened when I was on my way to New York on 9/11. The planes had hit the towers. My boss had called. She said, get on a plane. Then they ground all the planes. They said, get on the train. Trains were all stopped. So I rented a car with another reporter and we drove without stopping to New York. We got there the dawn of the next day. And I woke up as we were driving, we took turns and it was an SUV. I was lying in the back, trying to get some sleep. Woke up somewhere on the outskirts of Maryland and I looked up and I saw we were stuck in traffic at that point because everybody was trying to get everywhere on 9/11. And I could see trucks around me and the truck drivers were looking down at me as I'm lying there in the back of the seat of the SUV. And I thought, I don't know if I'm going to make it out of this alive. We don't know what else is going to happen. But if I do, I'm going to apply for a Nieman Fellowship. And we made it through. And when I came back, I did apply. And I spent the next couple of months every weekend working on my application. I didn't do it in a couple of days. I didn't wait until the last minute to ask my references if they would be references for me. I gave them all plenty of time to write the letters. I really committed to it. I was prepared when I went in the door for the interview. I could tell that I had done well in the interview, that one compared to other ones that I had done. In fact, I walked out the door in Massachusetts and in Cambridge, and I look around. I don't see anybody really except some guy walking his dog. So I call my boyfriend and I say, I don't think I effed it up too badly, except I didn't say effed it up. And it turns out that guy walking his dog was the husband of somebody who was on the judging panel. And they thought it was hilarious, thank goodness. And they did give me the fellowship, which was a year at Harvard, all expenses paid, to do whatever you want. Go to every class, go to every event, everything is open to you. They treat you, extremely well, and you learn so much. It was an incredible gift that I will never forget, one of the highlights of my life. So that also came from me committing to that idea. And that's where I'm honing in here for all of you, is that, again, based on reality, what your skill sets are, what you already know, how you can proceed in life, what your circumstances are. If you think you really want to do something, you do need to really commit to doing it and come up with all the ways that you can do it. And that means weaving around obstacles. It means finding other ways. And that sort of leads me to the next part of what I wanted to talk about, which is you need to ask yourself, why not me? Why not this? I think that's easy to do, but it's also hard to really think through. For me, a person, I have a tendency to think, well, no, I probably can't. And I guess that's that imposter syndrome that's coming out, that so many people struggle with. But I have to think a little bit more positively for myself. And I have to say, I have a platform. I have abilities. What am I going to do with that? And it helps me if I flip it on its head, and rather than say, why shouldn't I do this? I think, what is my responsibility to do something good with this opportunity that I have today? And that somehow frees me up, and it may work for you too, where you think, look, not this place in life. Not everybody has this platform available to them. Not everybody has this skill set. I've worked hard to be here. What am I going to do with that? How am I going to make a difference in the world? How am I going to leave things better than when I started? And so when I thought about it that way, it makes it much easier for me to say, I'm going to write this series, or I'm going to apply for that fellowship. It takes away the me part of it and makes it more like I have a responsibility to do right with what I have, because not everybody has it. I think that's a critical flip in your mind on how you can really open up opportunities for yourself. It also applies to networking, which is something that I didn't really understand for a long time. I had a wonderful mentor, the publisher of the Miami Herald. I was lucky enough to have Alex Villock as my mentor for a while. It was a formal program that they set up at the Herald. And I was probably not her best mentee. I think I was late to some of the meetings. I don't know that I fully appreciated everything she was doing for me, but let me tell you, I appreciate it now. And I have told her that. And one of the things she taught me about networking was, you go to one of these events and you feel awkward and you're like, I don't have anything to say to these people. They don't know me. I have nothing to do with them. And so it's easy to sit in the corner or to just talk to the people that you already know. But she taught me to think about networking, and not just in a physical sense, but also social media, which is huge for networking. Think about what you can do for the other person. And then it stops being awkward and starts being someone, which is a whole different mindset again. You're like, suddenly you feel much less pressured. You feel more open. You're offering to help. And if you get rebuffed or you can't help someone, so what? You're trying. And sometimes you can help them, and then you forge a connection that's real. It's based on something that's actual, not I need to get to know you because you're powerful. So for me, the networking equation changed dramatically when she talked to me about that. And I have always retained that. I think that has really helped me build a better network after that. And that includes not just people who can do something for you, who maybe are at a higher position in your organization, but also people that you can help who are not, who maybe are looking to you for help. Because those people move on and do other things, you have real friendships, then you're much more likely to be able to help each other if you have started with that idea of like, let me see what I can do. So it comes back to that once again, that idea, what can I do? I took a class when I was at Harvard, a leadership class that has stuck with me also, where they taught us that it was a very interesting experiment where they put us in a group of, I think it was 6 people. And these were people from all walks of life. There was somebody who worked for UNICEF, internationally, and people who were, in upper echelons of the state of the attorney general's office in New York, and all sorts of like different walks of life. And what you had to do was describe a problem that you were having in your work life and describe it fully to the group. And then you had to sit there and shut up while they discussed your problem and what you could do better in front of you. And that is a humbling experience, because you start to realize how much of your dissatisfaction is based on things that you might have done differently, or you might have seen an opportunity, but you're so caught up in your own feeling right about something that you don't understand what you've just ignored. So I described a problem, and they sat there and said, well, she had an opportunity to talk to this other executive in the paper, and she didn't do it. He seemed like he would have been an ally. She didn't take it. She allowed this person to derail her when she could have just continued on her path, but she got mad about it. She got emotional. There were all those various things like that. And I thought, wow, okay, that's a big change in your mindset. And so since then, I have very frequently said to myself, okay, this person is getting in my way. This obstacle is in my way. I can't get that done. What else can I do? And that is a big difference from sitting there and stewing about how you're right and everybody else is wrong. The boss above you doesn't do their job correctly. The organization doesn't have sufficient resources. The person you relied on failed you. And yet what? That's the thing. You have to keep saying to yourself, what about that? So is it about your ego? Is it about your emotions? Or is it about actually moving forward and getting what you want out of the situation? So that's one of those things that I have done repeatedly in my life. When I have reached an obstacle since then, I have thought, what can I do? What's open to me? What are my options here? And keep thinking about it, because sometimes your first round of ideas doesn't work. And it doesn't always work. And sometimes truly the organization is bad, or the person is out to get you. But very frequently you can find a way to do it in a different way, to find a different path, to overcome the obstacle somehow or work around it. So I think that's an important distinction to make when you are reaching obstacles in your life. And I have a few more points I want to make. I know we're probably running out of time. I'd say finding allies is really important, and they don't just have to be women. Some of my best allies are men, but they are people that you have an affinity for, where you maybe see things in a similar light in some ways, but also people who are different from you, because they can show you things that you don't know. So respect that knowledge, respect those other people, and bring them actively into your circle so that you learn more from them. I would say you cannot avoid cringe. I think Taylor Swift said that, but you can't. You can't avoid it. People are going to embarrass. You're going to be embarrassed by what you do. You're going to fail. You're going to feel like people are talking about you at times. You must live with that. It's okay. You'll manage. So don't let that be the thing that stops you from doing what you want. And I would say step up and own it. Step up and own what you're trying to do. When you see an opportunity, an opening, and you get the chance to do it. Don't kind of do it. Don't half do it. Ask for help. Ask what else you can do. Take on more responsibility, because those things are noticed. Those things are appreciated. It helps you work your way up, but it also helps you have friends around you. And then I would say one more thing that the dean mentioned, which I really believe in, which is be kind. Come to your meetings, your moments of confrontation with a good heart. Assume the best of the other person. Try your best with that, because that takes you a long way. I didn't realize for very many years how important it is to be a kind and open person. Your work will speak for you in many ways, but so does your demeanor. So if you sort of try to see the kindness and the best and people in the best light, I think that really helps you in sort of a satisfaction in life, not just satisfaction in your career. So I have many more things I could talk about, but I'm going to stop there because I don't have much time. I think Stephanie up with some questions now.
Amy, first of all, thank you so much. So much wisdom, so much experience that you're sharing. And I speak for myself, and I know behalf of everyone here, we're so impressed by you, your caliber of work, and your commitment, right, to something like this. You said something, and it really resonated with me while I was listening to you. This has been a process. Finding your voice has been a process. When we think, I'm almost 20 years into TV now. Been doing this for a while, several years, as you know, working in South Florida, local and national. You touched on something, maybe it's the imposter syndrome, you said, that can visit us here, especially females. Young women looking at someone like you, interested in a career, and really struggling with even finding that voice, let's say in school or in their first job, what's one piece of advice you can give these young and aspiring professionals? One or two sentences.
Well, I have struggled with this. I told you I was shy, and I think that I have great feelings for people who have that problem. But I think you just have to keep doing it. It's painful. It's so painful. It's so hard. It's so embarrassing. But I think you have to force yourself into doing it as much as possible, because the more you do it, the easier it gets. And speaking up is hard. I worked in Tallahassee as a young woman in a press corps that was almost all men. And we would go to these press conferences with the governor, and, you know, I would raise my hand. My heart would be pounding. My heart would be pounding, but I had to ask my question, and I did it. And so I would say that there's nothing to substitute for actually just going forward. Try to put that out of your head. There is one little tip that I heard that sometimes helps me, which is if you can reframe your fear or your worry or your concern as excitement, it sometimes helps. So if you can say to yourself, okay, I'm a little bit apprehensive about asking this question of the governor, but I'm also excited to have the opportunity. I'm excited to have the chance to do this, because who else gets this chance? Not many people. Suddenly your demeanor changes, the way you feel changes, and you're more able to get the question out. So I would say I try that. Sometimes it doesn't always work, but it often helps me now.
That's great advice. And I mean, you know this with your background with reporting. I've been a reporter for decades. Uh, all people are different, right? But there's some themes that are the same. And I'm not a shy person, but that feeling you described, the being afraid in the room as a young reporter, especially, and even now, when I got to the New York market, it's like I'm in the number one market, that pressure to perform. Even someone that's extroverted, I felt that. I think a lot of younger women and even mid-career women, and honestly even somebody like me, if I should choose, let's say one day, to transition to management or a leadership role from the craft, you're gonna confront those challenges. You say keep doing it, and I think it's the reps, right? That's what makes you an expert. The athletes in the gym, right?
So true.
They're working out every day, right, Amy? And that's what we're
Absolutely.
doing. We have a question from Alicia. She's in the crowd online with us, and she wants you to answer. I have good ideas for story leads, but no one is listening. How do I stand out to be listened to?
A tough question. And we've all had it. I certainly have had meetings where I sat there and said something, and then someone else, often someone of a different gender, would say the same thing more or less, and suddenly it was a great idea. I think we've all had that experience. It is hard to get people to listen to you when you are younger. It just is. I certainly felt that way. There are some things you can try. One thing, and I wouldn't say this for very long, but maybe initially, is to try to pair yourself up with somebody else with more experience. Sometimes doing work alongside someone else, assuming that they are a good-hearted partner who will give you full credit for your work, that can help you get your voice elevated. The other things I think are maybe you can talk to someone one-on-one about that feeling. I have an idea, I would like to have it heard, but I can't seem to get it heard. Can I talk to you about it? Being that straightforward. And then you have to have the goods. So if you have an idea, make sure you have done the legwork on it. I had a young woman who started working with me. She had a 6-month job with me. And on her first day, she came in with a plastic binder, the big kind, with all the plastic pages. And each page, she had a fully fleshed out story idea with sources and the names of people and phone numbers and emails. And she probably had 15 of them on her first day. We didn't do most of those stories, but that level of preparation was very impressive. And she has soared since then. She works for the 19th now, which is a publication about women's issues and LGBTQ issues. That's a nonprofit and doing wonderful, wonderful work. So I would say, there's finding someone to an ally for you, whether it's an editor or a colleague. And then beyond that, I would say, make sure you are prepared and that you can actually articulate the idea and that it's a real idea with all the work done.
So I think that's great advice. I think, and I tend to tell this to young students, people I've mentored. I love what you said, by the way, about this whole networking thing, right? Like it can be intimidating, but it's a back and forth dialogue. when you're coming to the table with ideas, you're gonna get the no's, right? I've worked in a lot of newsrooms, you know this, Amy. Everyone's busy, everyone has their projects, their personal life, their deadlines, their stories they gotta do, their passion projects. So what I found is, yes, you gotta do the work. And like you said, take ownership of it. But once you start doing the work that gets you that one story that kind of gets you noticed, then you take that as energy, right? There's something about building that portfolio. Can you talk to our attendees about really the idea that the craft is passed down, that's why you're suggesting find somebody that can help you with this, but also it's about building the portfolio. You gotta have something to show.
Yeah, I think that that's really, really important. You make an excellent point. The in journalism anyway, and I think this is the case in many places, many kinds of work, the proof is what you just did or what you've been doing lately. So something you did, a long time ago, people maybe not remember, or but success builds success, even small successes. So they don't want you to do your project because maybe it's going to take a year and you just started your career, and that's not the kind of commitment they can give you. But can you do one small story on that project that takes you a couple of days? And then you have something to show. And then you say, but now I have this one that I can write next, or that I can produce next, or I can, as success begets success. So you start with one, you build another, and pretty soon you have a track record with the people around you of competency, of delivering on time, of doing accurate work. And then it has some momentum, and you can talk your way. I've seen it happen many times. Talk your way into something much bigger that maybe the thing is not exactly what you pitched originally, but it's in the zone, and you can be really proud of that at the end. But it can be a process. You have to also be aware that if you are just starting out in your career, people don't automatically trust that you know what you're doing, and they don't have any reason to. You haven't shown it yet, but you can show it really easily. Right? Again, this is a journalism thing, but writing more is better. Write a lot of small things, but write them and get them done on time. And that helps to build a reputation of credibility and timeliness and all the things that bosses look for. So that the next time they're scanning the room looking for somebody, or they're thinking, who can I get to go to, they think of you. And that's when breaks happen. That's how you make your career.
I was doing some reflective thinking recently. Interesting what you say. TV, they say the version of that is, Amy, you're only as good as your last live shot, right? So, like, you flubbed, you can do it tomorrow in TV, right? Especially in local TV news, but you're only as good as that. But I've come to the conclusion that you're also, as you continue to build a career, as good as the caliber of your work. And that's the whole idea that journalism, two journalists, a dialogue in here, but to open this up to everybody here, in communication disciplines across the board, that portfolio, that reputation, that professional trust, the credibility that you earn, it's built over time, right? So the caliber of your work should be excellent, but it's also about having the library, like you suggest, writing those shorts in day out, hitting those deadlines, and even further your professional reputation coming to something like this. We
Right.
want to thank, right, Amy, all our attendees. Thanks for coming and joining us here online, and thank you so much again for those joining us maybe a little later. Amy, you're so impressive for really lending your time, lending your voice. I have a question from Sophie for you. She asks, I'm in the process of designing my own reporting blog. Any advice on how to best get my platform out to news organizations?
That's a really, I think it's a really good idea to start with. I like that a lot. I would say that first of all, you need to be aware of what people are actually going to want to read. So you need to look at what's out there, what's important to people, what's getting a lot of attention, and be writing about those things. So one of the things that we do in professional journalism is we try very hard to compete for people's attention, and that's the same thing you'd be doing on your own site. So you have to make sure that it's something that people actually want to read, and then again, it comes down to networking quite a bit on something like that. You have to, do you know some people you can send it to? Do you have a few people who could promote it for you? Do you have other people's platforms that you like that you could complement and then ask them to cross post or in some way elevate your voice? Because it would take a while, I think, to build that up, but it's totally doable. There are people in Miami who do that, and we read their sites. So I think it's a great way to get known. I think it's a very entrepreneurial activity I think it would stand out to people if you apply someplace else. And you learn a ton doing it. Plus, it'd probably be really fun. So I think that's a wonderful idea, but I think you have to work your connections on that as hard as you can, but also think about the quality and content of what you're writing. Make sure it's something that people want to read, and make sure you're executing it at a high level, not something that's unproven. Don't traffic in rumors. Make sure you show your work. Where do you get the information? The basic stuff. Look at the New York Times, or look at the Washington Post or somebody, and see how the style that they use, and use that style. To be taken seriously, you want to act seriously, and so you need to conform to some of the conventions. You can always break the rules, but to build your reputation now, you need to understand what the rules are and follow them for a while.
I think that's great advice. I always tell students, because I'm an adjunct professor as well, you want to make sure the work that you put out there meets the standards, right? So even if we're going to experiment with all these different types of reporting across platforms, it has to meet journalistic standards, and that's first and foremost. So I think you really are touching on that point. It's definitely understood. I have another question, though, from the audience. Victoria, she wants you to answer this one. Are you using AI as a reporter? Is this a tool that you see reporters using in the future?
I'm not personally using AI yet. I would say I can see some wonderful roles for it, to be honest. But not to replace us. I'll be clear there. I think one of the things that reporters now, and journalists in general, have to do, who produce any kind of content, is to do all the extra stuff yourself. You have to write your own keywords and your own headline that has the right words in it to catch the search engines. You have to write a summary. You have to get a photograph. You have to put a cut line on your photograph. You have to make sure that the words in the document somehow are going to catch fire online. And AI, I think, would have a wonderful role in doing some of the less artistic but more granular work. So keywords and summaries and things like that catch SEO, I think would be great. And we are at the Herald, we are using that. We are experimenting with it in McClatchy Wad. We're owned by a hedge fund. McClatchy Newspapers owns, I think it's 40 papers or something like that, 39 papers. And we are working, we have an AI project. We're trying to see where it can fit in without undermining our journalistic credibility. And that's a thing. I don't know how many of you have seen things that are written through AI, and sometimes it's great, and sometimes it's just completely not usable, off point. So I don't think we're there yet on AI, but I also think I could see a good role for it in some ways. We do have some AI generated content that's kind of what I call advertorial, which is that advertising that looks like a story, but it's not, but they label it. I don't love that stuff. And that sometimes is AI written right now. But they usually produce very boring stuff that nobody really wants to read. So I see a role. I think it's interesting. I think we have to keep experimenting with it. I could see it being very helpful to take away some of the less artful tasks that we have. But I wouldn't want to see it replace actual human beings.
So just reminding the attendees, you can send us questions. We can ask your questions to Amy through me. But I want to jump off of, the AI conversation, Dr. K, maybe that's a topic for another national conversation, because we can go on and on, right, Amy? I won't share my concerns or et cetera, or endorsements, but what I will say, and this is journalist specific, but I think in the climate that we're in, it's all around, because we see a great need, especially when it comes to video content and written content across platforms. What I see is not enough, in my opinion, originality. I want to see more originality, what we call the old school, old media, shoe leather reporting. But to broaden that out, can you talk to our audience about the importance of giving voice, finding the untold, highlighting issues that are not really talked about mainstream, bringing in discourse, regardless of the discipline and communication, that is not in the mainstream? Why is that important to you? A Pulitzer winning lifestyle. I use the word lifestyle because journalism is a lifestyle, but a long dedicated professional to this craft. Can you share that with us?
Yeah, I think that, originality is important. I think we have to open our eyes to things. There's no formula for that. I would say, to me, the overriding trait that comes to mind when you ask me that question is curiosity. I think that the best reporters, and often the most interesting people, are the people who are super curious. And journalism gives you license to ask a lot of questions to people, a lot of rude questions, a lot of fun questions, to talk to people you would never talk to otherwise, which is one of the reasons that I absolutely love doing that. But in general, the people who ask the questions when they sit down at lunch next to someone, or the people who ask questions of the person who is, fixing their car, or the more that you talk to people, the more you find such fascinating worlds out there that you know nothing about. I've always found that people who are passionate about their work are interesting, no matter what it is. And it's a delight to talk with them. And when you expose yourself to that willingly, you don't just sit with your headphones on and in the corner waiting for something to be done, but you actually converse and you look around and you comment on things and you see what's on the walls or whatever. You open yourself up to new experiences, which means new people, which means new voices. My former boss, who had this job before me, used to say she would consider it a success at any event she went to if she could find someone there where she would offer them the opportunity to write an op-ed for us, an opinion piece. And she did that on a regular basis. And I think that's a wonderful thought, because what you're basically saying is, I'm going to actively look around to see if I can find someone who's interesting. And that is a different mindset from, I'm going to sit in the corner and get through this, or I'm going to talk to the people I already know, or I'm going to ignore what's going on around me. I think when you can find other voices like that, they tend to be more original. They tend to be people who you wouldn't get to normally, and that can lead to all sorts of great stuff. And certainly it leads to letting people feel like they have a stake in things because their voices are being heard. And I just think that's incredibly important. I think that if we have more of a stake in the world around us, we act more responsibly, and we act for the good of everyone in a way that we won't if we're thinking only of ourselves.
Yeah, it's interesting because, there's this whole idea as a storyteller, the world is your classroom, right? But then we look at the world we're in today, so global, so connected because of where we've seen technology go. I mean, you've seen the changes to journalism specifically over your career, I know, Amy. But it seems sometimes that people aren't looking outside, they're looking in the screen, right? So I think we want to cultivate that environment where this is understood. What are some ways that you can suggest for young professionals interested in communications to really be able to flex that muscle of going out into the world and observing and finding, whether it's finding narratives, whether it's finding connections, especially maybe if, you are an introvert, because that can be hard, right?
Yeah, definitely. As I said, that's the thing that I dealt with for a long time. One of the things I think that helps is if you surround yourself with people who are curious people. There's a saying that you elevate or lower yourself based on the people around you who are closest to you. And I think that that's true to a certain extent. If you are surrounding yourself with people who are curious and who have interesting, crazy stories to tell, or people that they know that you would never know, or ideas to do things or create stuff, you also become like that. And then you are able more to do it. The more you think that way, the more you become that way. So I think that there's a level of opening yourself up, but also seeking it out. And that's, it's easy to stay comfortable. It's much easier. It's harder to expose yourself on purpose, but go to that thing that you won't know where you won't know anyone, and go see what it's about. And if you're embarrassed, you'll live. Take that chance, go out there, stand outside, get off your phone, go see people, go to events, try stuff, try a different sport, try, going to a community event near you. It doesn't have to be high level stuff, but each time you do that, you find a different community of people, you find different ideas, and all of that can help you incorporate that into your worldview.
Yeah, I think something that a lot of our aspiring professionals should really take home, and this is my opinion, my suggestion, and maybe as we wrap this first half, you can tell us your thoughts on this in closing, Amy, is this idea of the doing. So it's like wanting to do the work is great, studying to do the work is great, but we want to get you out participating, coming to things like this, going out, finding stories if you want to be a storyteller, getting internships, volunteering. It's about the doing, right?
Yeah,
Talk
I
to
mean,
us in closing, Amy, about how the doing helps you further find that voice.
well, it's kind of that thing you were talking about before, flexing the muscle is how you build the muscle. It is that too, where the more you do it, the more you're able to do it. The more opportunities come your way because you have done other things. This conference, none of us know what will come from this, but maybe you can talk with one other person while you're at this conference. I think it's a good place to start. When you're trying to build a career, trying to figure out how to get yourself out of your own bubble, there are a million ways to try that. Some of it's like look around online and see what there is, but walk outside also. Walk outside and see people, go to things, look around and be curious when you're out there. And then you're going to start to see more opportunities. I offered an opportunity today where if you want to write an op-ed, if you have something that you're interested in, that is a local issue of importance, you can write an op-ed, submit it to me. So we'll see what happens. So there are opportunities all the time, but you have to be looking for them. My brother-in-law always says, the harder I work, the luckier I get. And that's kind of how I feel. It's like the more that you try things, the more the luck comes. There's a book out by Ina Garten, the chef, where she says, the more you prepare, the more you're available for those lucky opportunities. And that's kind of how I feel. So you have to get out there, you have to try it. You never know where things are going to lead. And you can't go into it with a bad heart. You have to go into it with an optimistic viewpoint and just give it a try. And maybe you won't see the fruit today or tomorrow, but maybe a year from now or 6 years from now, or you'll be able to talk about that in a conversation with someone else, and then they will connect you with something that's fun and wonderful. You're investing in your own life by doing that. And it's easy to sit where you're in front of your computer, but it's better to get out there and do things.
And as I was making notes while you were talking, a note that I made for myself on my desk here in my home office, I have all sticky notes. It says, think of op-ed idea, maybe for you, or suggest to students to pitch to Amy. See? So,
and there are many
it's
places that take them, not just here. So if there's someplace else, their local
right.
paper might be a better fit, but
it's this idea, and I challenge all the attendees as we now open this up to the panel, right? I just shared that that's what I did because I just thought in my head, it's a nice way to wrap and segue, but not that I'm a TV reporter and anchor using segue on purpose. But what my thought was when you were closing out there is I'm so trained maybe, or it's so intuitive for me now to look for that next opportunity, to create that next opportunity, that it's just seamless. Like you were talking, I had follow-up notes for you, and then I said, okay, note for myself. So that's what this is about, right? It's about ideas, getting those ideas, participating in things like this. And then for our attendees, when you're at a level that, for example, Amy is at, a Pulitzer award-winning professional in communications, you can then share. And so that's what this is all about. We want to thank you so much once again for your time today. And we're going to open this up to our panel as we continue the conversation. I want to introduce the panel, and I just want to remind the audience, the virtual audience here, that you can send questions. We are taking your questions throughout our time here online. Charo,
thank you so much. Thank you so much, Stephanie, for having me.
No, thank you so
Wonderful
much.
to talk with you.
Yeah, no, it was just amazing. Dr. K is giving a thumbs up. I don't know if you want to give us 1 or 2 cents, Dr. K, but I know you're impressed because I've worked with you long enough. He's pleased.
Okay.
No, I also want to thank Amy. This was really inspiring, and there's so many really good ideas. I was taking notes as well. So many good ideas that you put forward. So thank you very much, and go do your endorsements. I know that's where you are now.
Yes.
Thanks
Thank you
again
so
for being
much.
with us.
All right. And Amy, are you staying with us for the rest of this?
I have to run.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. I will connect with you. I hope some of our attendees will. So thank you so much. Enjoy the rest of your day. We're going to continue with the panel. Thanks, Amy. So to our panelists, maybe you can just give a little wave as I'm introducing you, and then we'll get this going. Charo Enriquez, I want to welcome you here to the panel. Charo is a New York Times journalist working at the intersection of journalism and technology to help create better editorial operations and a more inclusive culture in newsrooms. She focuses on leading innovation in news organizations currently. Enriquez is a part of the leadership team of the culture and careers department and leads the newsroom development and support and research teams at the New York Times. She's also the president of the Online News Association's board of directors. In 2021, she was a fellow at Columbia University's Sulzberger Executive Leadership Program. Enriquez has been faculty for ONA Women's Leadership Accelerator, Poynter Institute's Leadership Academy for Women in Digital Media, and NAHJ's Adelante Academy. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you. Farnoosh Tabari is an Iranian-American journalist and one of the country's leading personal finance experts. She hosts the Webby-winning podcast So Money, which has earned over 30 million downloads. On the program, she interviews CEOs, leading entrepreneurs, creators, and celebrities. She's a sought-after speaker and author of multiple books, including Psych Yourself Rich and When She Makes More. Her newest is A Healthy State of Panic, part memoir, part guidebook on how fear can be a superpower to achieve true wealth and career success, along with being featured in the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, and Time Magazine. Tarabi hosted a business series on CNBC and has appeared frequently on Today, Good Morning America, and more. Thank you for being with us. I want to introduce Kim Williams. She's the group account director at Walton Isaacson, leading the Home Depot business with strategic insight and a wealth of experience. With over 25 years in the industry, she's honed her expertise across television media, management consulting, and advertising, working with major sectors in retail, technology, and nonprofits. Her impressive career includes spearheading marketing efforts as chief marketing officer for Usher Raymond's nonprofit, Usher's New Look, and managing high-profile accounts for renowned brands such as Newell Rubbermaid, the Coca-Cola Company, and Verizon. Beyond her corporate achievements, Williams is passionate about nurturing the next generation of talent. She serves as an account management instructor for the advertising nonprofit BLAC, where she mentors and prepares aspiring minority professionals for successful careers in advertising. And thank you for being here. So to continue the conversation, panel, let's start with the theme, right? So we're talking about finding your voice. I think something we got from our keynote is that this is a process and that we understand that professionals at every level, but especially aspiring and young professionals, like most of our attendees today, can struggle with that process and really knowing where to start. For myself, and I want to then open this up to the panel, when I started as a young journalist aspiring to be in television, I didn't have doctors, lawyers, and journalists in my family, right? I didn't have examples around me of people that were doing journalism or television. I had to really try to make a way for myself. And some of it came from mentorship, from fostering relationships, and also looking for those opportunities. It was a mix, but it can be overwhelming. To the panel, whoever wants to take this first, what is your experience with the beginnings of finding your voice?
I'm happy to jump in here. I'm really glad to be here. Thanks for having me. So I would say that the best piece of advice I got when I was starting out in my career in my 20s, I went to journalism school and I was very ambitious and I think overwhelmed with all the things that I wanted to accomplish. Where do I begin? Knowing too, like you, Stephanie, that I wanted to pursue television at some point. The best piece of advice I got was to really hone in on my writing. writing is foundational. And I don't assume that everybody enjoys it, but it is a skill. And I know AI is, and you talked a little bit about like AI and you know, it's TBD how good AI can get in the writing sphere, but I think that it is an incredible investment in your longevity in your career in media. It would behoove us all to just really write and rewrite and rewrite. And I'm not saying you have to write a book, you don't have to write a blog, but can you write a really good email? Let's start there, because that is what, for me at least, has been a seed that has bloomed into so many other skills. Like at the end of the day, if you can write, you can communicate and speak well eventually, if you're not a great public speaker. But when I write an article, for example, and I think about all that it takes, it's the reporting, it's the researching, it's the reflection, it's the erasing, and then the editing. It's an arduous process, but again, it's an investment, because once you're done with telling that story or writing that, whatever it is, that took time and effort, that it sort of lends itself to other mediums. So much of my work in television and in podcasting and in, you know, even social media, it starts with first having being grounded in the writing. And then from there, everything else almost feels a little bit easier to do, because you've done the harder work of sitting down and getting your thoughts on paper and editing and getting clear on paper. And that perhaps it's a personal thing, but I really think there's a universality in just being insistent on focusing on the writing. And again, it could even just start with, are you emailing in such a way where you are getting your point across and you have to be thoughtful. One of the best classes I ever took in college was just how to write an email to a professional, not a friend, right? But to someone who you are in a negotiation, right? Whether you're like asking for help, or you're offering your services, or you need information, or you want to set up a meeting, like there's an art to that. So learning that is critical.
I think that's great advice. You know, I filled more journals at this point than I can count. Long before I knew I wanted to be a journalist, I remember being a kid, like 7, 8 years old, writing in journals, like that young. And then, life brings you to the next thing. But I think the reflection piece is also important. I want to ask Charo to weigh in on this next point. I think that it's important to make. The reflection helps you as the writer, the journalist, the professional communicator understand your motivators. When I guest lecture and teach, I often talk to students and also aspiring professionals about knowing your why, knowing your motivators. Currently, as Dr. K mentioned in my introduction, I have a series here in New York, Migrants in America, in their own words, and it documents the many migrants that have come to New York City during what the city has called its migrant crisis. And within that reporting, what I have been able to do is sort of bring together the years and years of my career, but the reflection piece comes to really knowing yourself. I mean, I come from a family of immigrants, right? I myself immigrated to the US from Canada. So there's this understanding of yourself and your why and what you can really bring to a newsroom, to an organization, as a professional communicator. Charo, this is kind of your space. Talk about that. Talk about the importance of really having an inclusive culture from a management perspective, but as young aspiring professionals, really holding on to what makes you you and how you can turn that into a professional key, into a door maybe.
Yeah, thank you so much for the question, and thank you for having me. I want to get to that, but I want to back up to what you were saying. I too was a journaler, and I too believe that writing is foundational. And because I was a journaler from the moment I was a kid, I knew I wanted to be a writer. I didn't know I wanted to be a journalist, but I knew I wanted to be a writer. And I developed a habit of writing every day. Even if I didn't have anything to say to my journal, I developed a habit to write every day and build that muscle memory. And that taught me that even if you don't like doing things, getting to practice them. I also like played the piano when I was a kid, and I didn't always love practicing. But when you are developing skills and when you are developing your craft, you need to do the things to build that muscle memory, to build those foundational skills. I've been a journalist for 28 years. I joined a newsroom, my first newsroom, right out of college as an internship in 1996. And that's the same year that newspapers went online. So I went into a newspaper thinking that I was going to be a print reporter, not knowing that the internet was about to change everything. So for the first 19 years of my career, I worked in my newsroom in San Juan, in Puerto Rico. So all I saw were people like me. I did not see Latinos in news or Latinos in leadership positions. What I didn't see was people who thought about the digital report. And I am part of that generation of journalists that had to figure out how to put the news on the internet. Because in the first 2 years of my career, I was a business reporter that then transitioned to being a copy editor. And then in the year 2000, I went online. And it was going to be a temporary situation where I went to go learn about the website and go learn about the internet to bring that back to a reporting job. And I never went back. And I developed a career in change management, in developing culture, in training, in innovation in newsrooms, and in making change more humane and more palatable for people who are really good at their craft, to put them in an uncomfortable spot where they have to learn new skills and they have to break through that comfort zone that they're in. I used to say that because I came into newsrooms in a point in our industry that was being very disruptive or very disrupted, I had no choice but to learn all these things and pick up all these tools along the way. I was gently corrected by somebody relatively recently who said, you have peers that came up in the same time as you did and remain writers or editors and never deviated from that track. You picked up those skills because you were curious about them.
Mm.
And curiosity, and particularly earlier in your career, saying yes to opportunities that you may not be very clear on whether or not they are what you want, and being open to opportunities to build skills and to collect those tools in your toolkit to be able to know if that is something that you want to pursue later or not is key. So because I came up in an industry that was really disruptive, that was being shrunk, that was changing, that was evolving, I had to learn about those skills. I had to apply that curiosity that journalists have to not only like my sources or my stories, but actually the industry, and start thinking about change and start thinking about how change happens, and eventually how to make change less traumatic for people, and how to teach journalists to be better managers, to take care of their teams, and to evolve in the way in which we introduce change to people. Because change is a constant. And we mentioned AI a little earlier, and AI is just a new set of tools that we have that are coming into the industry the same way that the mobile phone came, the same way that social media came. It's different sets of tools that you have. Knowing that and knowing the value that over time I built by learning those skills, by learning those tools, by being able to coach or teach others, I was able to transition and build a career in roles that didn't exist, in positions that didn't exist, in spaces where there were opportunities, but the roles were very well defined. And by saying yes to opportunities, I developed a really robust toolkit. So I was then put in a position to say, I see these are the opportunities that are available, and I can be the person to help you solve those problems, and was able to very confidently pitch myself as the person who could occupy a role, as the person who could build that job for myself. Most of the jobs I have had in my career did not exist before I took them, or now exist after me and the generation of journalists that like built all these like digital jobs did the hard job of like defining what the thing was, to then build a job description around it, to then be able to hire people or even teach people these skills. Saying yes to opportunities, saying yes to learning skills, and using that curiosity to build your portfolio and your skill set is key, so that you can then develop the confidence to say, these are the things I know, and these are the things I know I'm very good at, and this is why you need me.
Such great insight. And honestly, what I kept thinking as you were talking and sharing your thoughts and your experiences is there's a level of bravery, have the courage to do it, that's involved in this, in taking up space. In sitting at the table, in deciding to go. I remember when I started in TV news almost 20 years ago, they told me TV news is dying, and then the whole digital question was already on the table, as you alluded to with your timeline, Charles. But the idea of, okay, so this is dying, or this is changing. I'm still going to do it. I'm going to figure out how to be a trailblazer, to be an innovator in the spaces of communication and beyond. There's bravery that's required to believe you can collaborate and work with companies. I'm bringing in Kim now. We talked about Coca-Cola in your bio, Verizon, and just the high caliber of corporations that you are adverse with, are working with. Kim, talk to us about that bravery component, having the confidence to find the voice to eventually sit at the table.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for having me. I will piggyback on the fact that I'm a forever journalist. I started off as a journalism student at Ohio University and then transitioned into news. My first job for 3 years was at a CBS station in the Cleveland market. So I'm a forever journalist, and I definitely believe that writing, being able to write, is one of the core skills, and it is one of the skills that has allowed me to transition into different roles within the communications category. And so writing is very important. I say mentorship is very important, but being able to have a clear vision for your own career path is very important when you're working with mentors as well. When you come into a mentor, you have to have an idea. It's not like someone's just going to direct you and tell you what you should do. It's really leveraging your network and your mentors to get you into place. And so those are two non-negotiables, I think, that have helped me in my career. And after transitioning out of journalism, I went to Northwestern at the time, created a special program called Integrated Marketing Communications. And that was in the late 90s. And that was a kind of a opportunity for people like me who wanted to transition out of a newsroom and into advertising, management consulting, and other types of business roles. And so with my opportunity, I was able to not go right out into advertising, but I was able to go into a management consulting firm, two of them. I worked consecutively for about 8 years in management consulting. And that was the first time that I had an opportunity to work with large companies within the communications practice. And so with management consulting, you'll find that, it's intellectual capital. There's really not a product, a tangible product, in terms of, you're not giving someone a can of Coke or, something that they can actually hold in their hand. It's literally you're selling your ability or your firm's ability to help provide strategy to your clients and add value to them in a way that they don't have time to think about, or they just haven't been able to see that perspective. And so when you're talking about Verizon, you're talking about Coca-Cola, when you're working in professional services, whether it be management consulting or advertising, it's really important to just, one, stay on top of what's happening in the business world. What are consumer trends? Looking at analytics, looking at consumer behavior and understanding what's happening. Gen Z is a whole new segment that has a very different way of thinking and how they behave. And so it's still very important for me as a marketing person to think about, how do we want to communicate to different audiences? And so working with big brands is no different, honestly, than working with some of the smaller ones. It's just that there's more money on the table that you have to help them deliver. But being able to have a methodology in terms of how you approach your work and how you approach your thinking, and being strategic and really being able to articulate. And again, writing is at the foundation of all of those things. being able to articulate your thoughts and be able to be concise and clear when getting your points across, being able to provide a different perspective and thinking of things differently than someone else, is all the things that help to add value. And so I think that those are some of the key things that I would suggest to some of the younger leaders coming up behind us.
To the panel, whoever wants to take this as we continue the conversation, when we look at the complexities facing communications across industries, and really, I think facing a lot of industries right now. You know, we saw a large shift in the pandemic to these hybrid, what we see now more as hybrid roles, but to that working at home and sort of coming out of that. And then there's like the whole thing that's happening with the economy and how a lot of people, I mean, I'm a reporter, I talk to a lot of people are concerned about their own home, their money. So finding kind of the courage to kind of go after a career. And I'm thinking back to when I was in school, high school, and then later in college, where I was told, well, this isn't a realistic career path. So finding the courage, the strength to pursue what you feel your calling is within the field of communication, when maybe the voices and what the world is telling us right now is like, okay, maybe something more stable, maybe choose a path that's more direct. I'm sure to anyone on the panel, you've confronted these opinions throughout your career. So in today's climate, what suggestions do any of you have for those that are joining us today?
I'm only laughing because that was all I heard in the run
Yeah.
up to becoming a journalist. I even heard from journalists who would come to speak at my high school or at my journalism school, and they'd say, you know, it's
Don't
tough.
bother.
You have to work Thanksgiving, you have to give up your weekends, and this is obviously before hybrid, but I was set out to prove them wrong. And I think that a few things really quick. So I studied business in undergrad and then I went to journalism school. And I think what has helped me be a really good negotiator for myself, in terms of what I get paid and also just creating opportunities for myself, where I think this was a little bit of an earlier time when being entrepreneurial as a media person was not expected of you. Even when people were freelance, we were afraid for them, like, how are you going to get your benefits? But now it's sort of expected that you're going to have a personal brand and you're going to, maybe even in parallel to working in a newsroom, having your own sort of operation on the side. It's just diversifying your income streams, perhaps. And so having that business background, knowing the importance of being my best advocate, my biggest advocate, knowing how to sell a story, knowing how to negotiate for myself, this helped me at least sort of, maybe not, I wasn't, laughing all the way to the bank, but I was at least able to create more revenue for myself. I had a full-time job in a newsroom. I also wrote freelance articles on the side. I tried to find work that was within my wheelhouse, that was still like helping me advance, that my full-time employer approved of, and that I could, really pay back my student loans. And my first newsroom job, I was making, an hourly wage in New York City. And I don't have to tell anyone who's lived in New York that it doesn't go very far, especially again, if you have debt and all of that. So I had to find other work. But the beauty of working in the media is that there's a lot of different work that you can do, and now with the internet, we didn't really have the robustness of the internet back then. I had to actually like file stories and go out in the field, and we weren't really emailing that as much. And so now I think it's a lot faster to sort of secure these extra revenue streams for yourself as a journalist, beyond the 9 to 5. And then I would say that, so yeah, that was this, having that sales background. Like, I remember being a journalism student and writing articles for our teacher for our class, and they weren't the best. I wasn't the top student, but as soon as class was over, I was calling editors and newsrooms and pitching those stories or emailing to try to sell them to get published. and I made money, but more importantly, I was making a name for myself before any of my classmates. I was getting the bylines because I knew that at the end of the day, if you're a spectacular writer, but no one's reading your work, you're probably not getting paid, right? And you have to be the one who is the hustler. Like getting discovered is not, that's not happening.
You gotta make your own
You
opportunities,
gotta
right?
make your own opportunities. And I also pursued business journalism, which pays better, at least then it did, than let's say pursuing deadline writing at a newspaper, right? Like it's just that the employers like Bloomberg and Reuters and Fortune and Money Magazine at the time, they were known for paying a little bit more. And I would be lying if I said that that wasn't part of what sort of drove
The incentive.
this,
Yeah.
initially, but I liked it too, so that helped.
Farnoosh, I have a question for you. It's from Tori in the audience, the virtual audience. What advice do you have for women wanting to start their own podcast? What should I be doing now? What are the best platforms to host your podcast?
Wow. Okay. How much time do we have?
So
I
a
think
condensed version.
my podcast is turning 10 years old. So it's different today than obviously 10 years ago. But I think that I would suggest that within the category that you want to launch, to really survey the existing podcasts to see what is already out there and how you're going to differentiate. Podcasters are not YouTubers. They're not passive. They're not like watching a 2-minute clip and moving on. They are devoted, dedicated, and just to get them to subscribe, I think it's a bigger ask of a person, right? I mean, think about all the people you're following on social media versus how many podcasts are you listening to? It's a dedicated medium for the listener. So just, I say this because I want to make sure that you're providing something that is additive and not an echo chamber or just one more podcast in this genre. That don't be afraid to go really deep. They say that the riches is in the niches. So really granular. Like I'm actually thinking of starting a podcast, another one that is hyper local to my town in New Jersey. And, is this going to get bought by Spotify? Probably not. Is this going to make us, billionaires? Absolutely not. But I know it can be within our community very successful because there aren't any podcasts really. I know the town is curious about learning about itself. And we're just going to, drill down on a local town. And I think that there's a lot of opportunity there when you think about just how granular you can get. And you don't need to be getting 1 million listeners. Don't think that you're not successful if you're not getting the millions of downloads or the thousands of downloads. But imagine 100 people are listening to your show every month or every week. I mean, that may not be a lot in the podcast world, but that's 100 dedicated listeners. Imagine walking into a room and speaking to 100 dedicated people that have come to hear what you have to say. That's a captive audience. And so I just say that because 50% of podcasters who launch within the first month drop out. And I think because they feel defeated. They feel like, oh, we're expecting, 1,000 likes. We're expecting that sort of instant gratification and that speed of the internet that your article goes viral. Podcasts don't really go viral, but they go deep. And so I think that's my biggest tip. And then the other is just make sure that you are as curious about this topic as your listeners. That we've talked about consistency, we talked about longevity. And the key to that is having a curiosity, because there are days where you're like, what did I get myself into? This is, technically maybe not my forte, but are you curious? And then lean on your audience who's just as curious to inform you of where to go with the show. Where are you going to talk about? Don't assume that you know everything or should know everything about where to go. But for me, like what has been like the secret, and it's the lazy route, but I love it, is just like asking my audience, what do you want? It's a win-win.
Right.
I give it to
Right.
them. Everyone's happy.
Great. That's great advice. I have a question for the entire panel. So whoever wants to take this to start us off, It's from Danielle, who's in our virtual audience. She says that it's the same question to revisit what Victoria asked a bit ago to our keynote. I've been told the AI prompter will be the new storyteller. What is your take on AI, and do we need to learn AI tools now?
Yes, you should be experimenting with AI tools. You should be learning about the toolkit that exists. There are some kind of like operational opportunities to improve or to streamline what the keynote speaker Victoria was talking about before, like metadata or like headlines or social copy or like things that are the work around the work. But these are also very good summarization tools, research tools that you can use in your reporting. So we still don't know how these tools are going to continue to evolve, and they have evolved very quickly. I think, like I said before, just like the internet or like the mobile phone or like social media or like email, changed kind of the game of how we create journalism, how we distribute journalism, how audiences consume journalism. It's important to understand what these tools do, how you can leverage them to assist in your reporting. There are things that prompt engineering, which I think it's to allude to the question, that's not equal to storytelling. Prompt engineering, it's really giving a detailed set of instructions for this assistant to do a thing and bring it back to you. We still need human oversight in these tools. We still need like human filters because the thing hallucinates. The thing is just making kind of educated guesses based on whatever database it's being trained on, but it's not a human brain. Maybe eventually it will evolve to a point where it can generate like smarter content or smarter information. Knowing what the toolkit is and how it exists in the ecosystem of tools is fundamental, because we can just like put our heads underground and say we're not going to be using AI because it's a threat. And if we had done that with the printing press or the television or the radio or any of those things, that would not have stopped them from coming and altering the landscape of media any more than kind of like putting our head under the ground. It's not going to stop technology to continue to evolve. So I say yes, experiment with these tools, try these tools, and know how to leverage them to apply them to your storytelling and to your craft.
Charo, an interesting observation I just made while you were speaking. Maybe interesting or maybe obvious as to why you're doing what you're doing, because we posed a question and you answered with a very leadership and newsroom training type of answer, right? So you're making an observation. You drew in your experience with digital over the course of your career and answered this question. And the reason I'm bringing that up to everybody attending today, because that's what flexing the muscles and the years and the days and the repetition do. It makes you an expert. I've had the opportunity to learn and to be mentored in different spaces throughout my career to get to where I am now. Shout out to Dr. Copenhaver. You know, now I'm here on her board and here able to moderate a panel like this. But it all started when I got to Miami as a young reporter and just started to get an interest in newsroom training. And then thought, I mean, could I teach one day? Could I be a guest speaker one day? And someone said, you should go talk to Dr. K at the Copenhaver Center. She took a meeting with me and she was so kind. I don't know if you remember, not if you do, Dr. And Lillian was there too. And I remember just saying, you know, this is something I want to do. And she said, well, Stephanie, why don't you host? It was an in-person workshop for us. And I thought, me? Right. And that was the first time I had the opportunity to do something like that. And then you think over the years, there's been different moments like that in my career. But the point is, it's the doing it day in, day out. People will often look at someone like Charo, the rest of our panelists or our keynote today, and say, I want to get there. how can I get there? That's what motivated the whole beginnings of my career. I want to be that woman on television, right? But the how really is in, the day out. And something that you said, Farnoosh, honing in on the small, on the niche, that's the whole bedrock of traditional, conventional local news, right? The starting small. It's about the themes, it's about the understanding, it's about the what brought you there. I threw out that question about the reflective thinking, the understanding why you're here, the knowing your motivators. And I think it's important when we talk about finding your voice. Kim, you said, I'm forever a journalist, forever a writer, forever a storyteller, and you're working in a whole different space. How does the accumulation of what we've done stick with us, in your opinion, Kim? Even if you segue and say, you know what, not journalism anymore, I'm doing something else within the space of communication, to kind of broaden this conversation out.
For me, I believe that, the biggest piece of advice that I would give is having the audacity to believe that you can do anything that you want. Like,
Yes.
I am a firm believer in that, and I am a witness to it. Every opportunity that I've ever had, as people say, well, why do you think you can do that? My mother, when I was applying to grad school, she said, you're just applying to one school? Yes, because I believe that I belong there. Any corporation, any company that I've ever dreamed of working in, or any capacity, I believe that I can do that. And so it's all about figuring out how you want to show up in the world. Representation is extremely important to me. And so being in newsrooms at the beginning of my career, as one of the few Black people in that environment, I understood the responsibility of journalism as it relates to telling stories in a way that bring integrity to people. And so that thought was just a seed in terms of how I showed up in my career. Advertising, management consultant, being one of the few people that look like myself, it's a huge responsibility to understand what you want to bring to the table, how you want to show up in the world. And so as a result of that, not only have I really worked hard in my career, but I've really worked hard to put myself in positions where I can give back to the next generation, because people who look like me, and a lot of people who did not look like me, really invested a lot of time, because I had the audacity to speak up and to ask and to say, hey, how do I get from A to Z? Can you help me? Can you show me? But I had a clear vision, for where I wanted to be. And sometimes that vision didn't serve me well. And sometimes I had to reconfigure the plan, and that's okay too. But you have to believe in the first place. Nobody can believe in you more than you can believe in yourself. And that takes a lot of audacity. But if
It
you
takes a lot of audacity indeed.
amazed. Yeah, you'd be amazed at where you end up if you believe in yourself to the highest level possible.
So, Kim, a question for you from the audience on the topic of believing in yourself. It comes from Natalia. She wants you to answer this. I'm a global strategic communication major trying to start my own brand of inspirational t-shirt apparel for the LGBTQ community. Any advice where to start? And then she says, I need advice on how to plan out my marketing plan.
Okay. Well, first of all, congratulations. I feel like, whatever you're going to create from a brand perspective, believe in it. If you're not inspired by what you're creating, then nobody else will be. And so I just believe that if you really kind of stand strong on what you're trying to create, really understanding your core audience, and then being able to speak to them authentically in your marketing and all of your advertising efforts, that's one big step to success. But then foundationally, really mapping out a plan. I tell everyone, really start with you have an idea, that's great. But what is your foundational plan? Think about your marketing as it relates to the resources that you'll need, the different channels that you'll want to be able to communicate, your audiences. How are you going to sell your products? So looking at all of those things, and then the analytics is always the tool to help you understand what's working and what's not. Looking at your sales, but looking at also how does your audience communicate with you on social? Is it a two-way conversation? Are you just talking to people? What are some other ways that you can partner with other organizations that believe in what you believe in, and creating those partnerships in a way that make it not just a product for sale, but also something that can be community focused as well. So it's really kind of a spectrum of things that you should be looking at But the main thing is, do you have heart? Do you believe in what you're doing? And if you do, that's the passion that'll help you drive all of those other things through.
Thanks, Kim. Something I'd like to share as we get into the next place I'd like the conversation to kind of take off with our panelists is, all these mentions of AI, see how important, we got to think about doing something on this, Dr. K, for real, but they're offensive to me. And I'll tell you why. I'm not as much of a big thinker as Charo. I've just had my head in the craft and being a good storyteller for like almost 20 years now. But I dedicated my life to this, right? So I remember when I was a young reporter and there was many stories that would bring me to tears, like quite literally, like sometimes before I had to write, I would be crying, and some of it is the life experience that I didn't have yet. And a mentor said to me once, when you cry, you make it about you. And if you understand that your job is to tell the story, now you shift it back on them and you just have the courage to do your best. And then, I never really cried when it came to stories again. But recently, as I've been doing just different projects within the space of academia, and critiquing work that young aspiring or young reporters are doing, there's some work I've seen and vetted and looked at and given feedback on that has made me want to cry. Meaning, I'm moved by those out there that have the passion and the drive that I recognize so much because I had it and I fought to get here. Sometimes there's not enough words of encouragement, right? Believing in yourself. We can say it now, panel ladies. We can say it because we did it. We know you keep doing it, and somebody will give you those little opportunities, like that first seminar that Dr. K let me host, and now here I am. It's just one example, but the believing in yourself, the finding the strength to believe in yourself when sometimes everyone in your life is telling you no, the courage to go into these spaces, right? Where can we go when the burden of what our passions are, of what our calling is, feels too much? And I'd like to get into this space of talking about, finding your voice when you know that's what you got to do and you don't know how to do it and you're maybe frustrated, you don't have that experience, but it just feels like I wish I wanted to be a lawyer, or I wish I wanted to be a teacher, or I wish my aspirations were just to be a stay-at-home mom. Who wants to take this? Kim?
I'll
Yeah.
go.
Right.
I have what I call a life board of directors. So sometimes, and these are people that are trusted. They know you better than anyone else sometimes. And sometimes it could be different layers in terms of you have people who work in your industry, then you have people who are not in your industry. There's a mixture of people in my life that when sometimes things have gone off track, or I'm not going down the path that I thought I should be in the speed that I think I should be or should have been, those are the people that I've been able to go to, who have been able to kind of help to remind me of the things that I talked about, that I put on my vision board, or things that I've wanted to accomplish. And so sometimes I think that those people are the accountability partners, in addition to what you're doing on your own in terms of journaling or just really trying to stay focused on your vision. Sometimes the people that are closest to you on that board of directors can help you to really stay true to what your vision was and remind you, because we get lost sometimes. When we get lost, we forget. And things can just look so dismal. And it's like, I just don't know. I don't know what I'm doing. I don't feel good about where I am. You can forget all of the things that you have accomplished. And sometimes that board of directors can remind you, no, remember, you've done this, you've done that. You just have to sometimes be able to kind of figure out, how to regain that confidence and get back on track. And a lot of times, because we forget about all of the great things we're doing, those people can really help. So I say invest in a life board of directors who really invest in you, and you can invest in them, and just hold each other accountable for some of the goals that you have in life.
You know what? I think that's such great advice. I remember, well, Dr. K is on my board, Kim, and especially when it comes to the professional space. And I remember when, I had the opportunity to do national news with BNC, the Black News Channel, and the network closed. And I didn't, I had a 2-year-old, and I had no job. And this is my life has been on the air. And I talked to the people that I trust, and I reached out to Dr. K, and she, said to me, you're going to do this.
and now I'm in New York. And I think that is so important, right? So you need those people with the pillars, right, in your life. And there's your family, and then there's your friends, and then there's the people you meet along the way. But it's understanding that even when that burden, and along the way, even when we're successful, I mean, life's going to throw things at you personally, professionally. You have those people to lean in on. And that kind of brings it back to what we're talking about, finding your voice and cultivating your voice in the discipline of communications. It includes others, because that's what we do, right? We're about the masses. Kim, you have a question. It's from Shelby. How do you manage to stay up to date with the new trends and incorporate them into the way you look at new projects?
Oh, that's a great question. Really reading a lot. I read a lot. I look at it, and because I'm in the advertising space as well. You really have to be able to understand what's happening, just from not only just how people are behaving and what they're thinking, but also looking at different product trends, what's happening across the board. And so I read a lot. I listen only pretty much to talk radio, which is a nuisance sometimes to my family, but just being able to and I do, again, I agree with Charo in terms of AI, but I would only say for younger people who are still trying to kind of find that balance in terms of knowledge and skill set, whatever you're putting in the AI, and make sure that you already have a well thought out thought or strategy or plan to put into AI. So don't just say, oh, give me a strategy. Think about your strategy and then fine tune it to see if there's something that you didn't think about. That's a muscle that I think people can really leverage when leveraging new tools like that. Also, from my field, we do a lot of consumer insights. I am a trained strategy planner in terms of I was taught consumer insights, and so really I could have just been a psychologist. I say that all the time, just really trying to understand how people behave and why they think that the way that they do, understanding how to motivate them to buy things. And so I think that skill set can go across the board in terms of understanding just what's happening in the world. What's happening with Gen Z is very different. Like I've had a couple projects where we're focusing in on Gen Z around music and cosmetics and things of that nature. And these companies, just so you all know, their dilemma is understanding how to incorporate a whole new target audience into the fold, because people who are older, they're not buying products as much as they used to. And so they're having to change the way that they communicate. And so just being able to understand what's happening around you, and not just limiting it to one type of industry. Like I said, journalists are very intelligent in the sense of you have to learn a lot of things all the time and be very curious. And so I think that skill set can really take you far in understanding how to stay on top of trends and really challenging yourself to be able to, once you do understand that, figure out what you want to be, the expert on. I don't know everything. And so I know what I'm really good at, and then I bring other people into the fold who can help to complement the things that I'm doing well. So.
Right. Thanks, Kim. Taking it from there and moving the question we're posing further, that's idea of finding your voice and how do we find our voice. Charo, and then Farnoosh, if you could jump in. So this idea for people starting out, whether it's in journalism or in advertising or in a space in communication, do you think it's best to try to get on with an established company, something, Charo, like the New York Times or, a newspaper that'll then, that's the trajectory or the aspiration, or doing something entrepreneurial? So I'm speaking to specifically to the demo of students and young professionals. Charo, if you want to start this off, what's your advice on that?
I think that really is going to depend on the person. I don't think there's one career path that applies to everybody. I think it's always cool to kind of think about this in a framework of a decision tree. What are your skill sets and what are the things that you want to learn more about, and what are the things you're really good at, or the things that you are not great at, so you can try them but you're not as confident about. So think about the things you're really good at, the things you're not as confident about, and the things you know nothing about but you want to learn more about, and start kind of like sketching out like what are the career paths that lead there. And then think about it as a decision tree, like in the media industry, what are the places where I can apply these skills, and like what are the possibilities that are out there? a lot of times people think very narrowly, like, I want to be a reporter and I want to work at the New York Times. That is such a narrow little window. And if it's either that or bust, it's most likely going to be bust because there's a limited number of those positions. If you open the scope and you start thinking about all the possibilities that match up with the skills you have and the skills you want to learn about, and take and apply that curiosity to thinking about, is it a legacy organization? Is it a digital organization? Is it television? Is it print? Is it a podcast? Is it radio? Is it starting my own thing? Is it working for a nonprofit? Is it working in a for-profit company? Is it in the digital side of a legacy organization? Is it a pure player that's in digital? There's like different options. Do I want to freelance for a while to build my network of connections and relationships with editors? Do I then want to leverage that into, like Farnoosh was saying before, like building my own thing, being more entrepreneurial about it? I think we talked about like hard skills of like writing as something core. You also need to apply that curiosity to understanding more about the business and the business models that are available. And also to Kim's point about understanding audiences and understanding people. How are people consuming information? How are you connecting with those audiences? So applying that curiosity not only to the beats you want to cover and the stories you want to write, but how the business works and what those opportunities are and how people are consuming information and how to get information in front of people. I think those three things are fundamental to open the possibilities more widely than just having a very narrow scope in, I want to write for the Miami Herald, or I want to work in Telemundo, or I want to do this one specific job in this one specific market.
That's great. Farnoosh, can you pick it up?
Yeah, I so agree. I think that especially when you're first starting out, realistically, you got bills to pay. And if that means taking a job, great. I think that if there's no shame in that, you know, and you can maintain your ambitions to have your own thing down the road, you can learn so much from working on someone else's time and getting their resources and getting them to help you with your benefits. I think when I was in my 20s, I had the job, and then I had no one else to take care of, fortunately, but myself. So I had extra time to devote to, if not making money on my own in some way with some enterprising project, but learning, right? I had hours to like invest to learn how to write a book, how to, you know, and go to networking events. So you can continue to invest in yourself and your future goals, whatever they are, in parallel to having that full-time job. So I think, you know, realistically, when you're first starting out, you might need to take that job, and that can be a wonderful stepping stone.
That's great. To the panel, we're gonna wrap this up, but I just wanted to go to each of you. If you want, maybe we'll start with Kim, we'll go to Charo, and then Farnoosh, you can wrap it up. One piece of advice in the arena of finding your voice, takeaway for our audience. Kim, you can start.
Once you develop a skill that you know that you're really good at, speak up. When you have a seat at the table, when you have opportunity to start off in your career and you feel like you're really confident in what you're doing, speak up. Don't allow others to just kind of talk and give ideas. You have a valid voice. You have the ability to make change, and you have ability to make impact. That's what the goal is when building a career, is being able to make an impact in your industry. So never be afraid to speak up, and be able to have dialogue with people who that you think are more important than you, especially starting out, right? That can be very intimidating. Oh my gosh, I don't want to, you know, say the wrong thing, or I don't, you know, they think I'm just this little, you know, person who's just starting. Be able to go up to those people to say, hey, do you mind if I pick your brain and take you to coffee and talk about some things in terms of your career trajectory? How did you get to where you are? Don't be afraid to talk to people. You'd be amazed at how people want to be able to mentor the next generation. So that would be my main advice in finding your voice.
Thanks, Kim, and thanks for being here, Charles.
Plus one to that, and also really look at the things that are part of who you are and part of your identity and part of the things that already come built in as skills, and a lot of times as marketable skills. Your perspective, your point of view, and those life experiences are valid, and not just valid, but they resonate with others like you who are out there and are not always represented in the space you want to occupy. A lot of times I talk to people who are self-conscious about having an accent because they're not native English speakers. And my response to that is, think about those poor monolingual people who don't have an accent because they don't speak two languages. That's actually a skill set that's actually valuable, and that's actually something that you should charge more for because you speak more than one language. So think about all the pieces in your identity that make up who you are, and carry yourself with a lot of confidence when you bring these things to the table, because they are the things that make you unique, and they are the things that resonate with others like you that might not have access to that room that you're in.
Beautiful. Thank you, Charles. Farnoosh, advice?
I would say that your voice at the end of the day is your expression of yourself. And it's not just how you speak and how you speak up for yourself, but it's how you present, it's how you relate, it's your reputation. And so if you aren't someone who yet feels the confidence to speak up, know that you can still have a voice and have that voice be known through how you show up in the world in other ways. Sort of what Chara was saying is sort of an expression of your identity. But don't think that that if you're not someone who loves public speaking or speaking up yet, that will come, but that doesn't limit your ability to develop a voice and to be known for who you are.
Thank you so much. Thank you to the panel for being here, and of course to our keynote, and all of you for attending this national conversation.